What up, y'all, and welcome to the Wizard's Forge. This video we're going to be covering how to create a brand new spell in the Creator Kit. So I'm going to create this new lightning spell called Fulminous that'll make a lightning effect wherever the player casts the spell. That being said, let's get started. First, we're going to create an empty mod. Then we're going to define our spell by using the DB static tables. After that, we're going to create a spell record and spell blueprint. This is going to tell the spell what kind of FX it should place and whether or not the player can cast it. Then we're going to localize our text and create a spell icon. After that, we're going to finish off our video by uploading our mod to CurseForge. To create our spell mod, first we're going to create an empty mod. So we'll select this Create Mod button. Select a new empty mod, and then we'll set our plugin name. I'm going to call this WFM_spellmod_01. Once that looks good, you're going to press the Create Mod button. The first step in creating our spell mod is going to be to add our spell to the registry entry. We'll do this by checking the Registry DB static table. So we'll make sure our correct mod is selected. Then we'll go to the Registry DB static text entry table. So we'll select Window, scroll down to DB text entry, select Static, type in registry, and then click this registry static table. Most items in Hogwarts Legacy are going to start out as a registry entry. This is going to let us name our entry and then define what type of subtype our entry is. This is commonly used for professors, spells, enemies, etc. Now to add our new spell, we're going to scroll down to the bottom, and on our registry ID, we're going to type in the name for our spell. So I'm going to make a lightning spell, and I'm going to call it Fulminous. Then we'll define the subtype. This is going to be a spell. So I'm going to click the subtype ID, type in spell, and then select spell. Once that looks good, you're going to press the plus button to add your entry. Next, we're going to add a spell upgrade entry just in case we want to upgrade this spell later on. So we'll do this by going to the SpellUpgrade static table. So we'll minimize out of this, we'll search spell, and then double click the SpellUpgrade. Then to add our entry, we're going to scroll down to the bottom of the SpellUpgrade static table. Now, very important thing to note, the Creator Kit is very particular about how these are named, so we're going to follow the naming conventions exactly, or there's a chance our spell might not work. So following the naming conventions for the other spells, we're going to call it spell_fulminous_base. Then when that looks good, you'll press that plus button to add it to the SpellUpgrade static table. Next up, we're going to set a lock for our spell. We're going to do this in the LockDefinition Static Table, so we'll minimize out of this, search lock, and then double click the LockDefinition Static Table. So we'll scroll down to the bottom, and then following the same naming conventions for the other locks, we're going to call this spell_fulminous. And then for this lock type, I'm going to select Simple Unlocked. This will unlock the spell by default, but if you want to, you can do it simple locked, and then decide how the player gets the spell. Once that looks good, press the plus button to add your lock to the LockDefinition static table. Then after this, we're going to want to make sure we close out of all of our static tables to refresh our changes. And now when we reopen our static tables, we'll be able to use those entries we just created in other static tables. Next up, we're going to add our spell to the SpellKnowledge table. So we'll select Window, DB static text entry, type in spell, and then double click the SpellKnowledge static table. This SpellKnowledge table will allow us to set if the player can use this spell and what color spell it's going to be. So we're going to scroll down to the bottom, and then in spell type ID, we're going to find the name of our spell. So I'm going to click this, type in Fulminous, and then click our Fulminous spell. Next up is going to be the spell category. This is going to be what color the spell shows up as in the player's spell menu. So you're going to have CC spells, which are going to show up as yellow, dark art spells, which are going to show up as green, forceful spells, which are going to show up as blue, heavy spells, which are going to show up as red, and then the sanctuary and tools, which are going to show up as a light gray. I want this to be a red spell, so I'm going to select heavy. These next two options don't appear to change anything, but they give us a chance to add some fun lore to our spell. I'm going to want this to be a data spell, so I'm going to click this, type in data, and then select data. I'm going to select data for both of them. Next up, very important, this allow in UI is going to be whether or not this spell shows up in the player's spell menu. So we're going to make sure this is set to on. And then this allow for companions is going to be whether or not companions have the ability to use this spell. And then this upgrade ID and lock are going to be what we set earlier in this video. So we'll type in Fulminous, then select our spell_fulminous_base. Then for lock, select lock, type in Fulminous, and we'll select spell_fulminous. Then this nurture only is going to be the spells we can only use in the sanctuary or room of requirement. I want to use this spell in combat, so I'm going to leave this blank. Once that looks good, scroll to the beginning, and then press the plus button. And then to verify everything works correctly so far, we're going to play into a level, open up our spell menu, and then we should see our red spell Fulminous. Next, to give our spell a little more information, we're going to open our SpellDefinition Static Table. So select Window, DB Text Entry, Static, type in Spell, and then double click the SpellDefinition Static Table. The SpellDefinition Static Table is going to give you a ton of information to further customize your spell, such as how far it can cast, the damage, and the cooldown time. This would definitely be overwhelming at first, so I'm just going to duplicate an existing one and then change the values to better match my spell. I want my spell to hit similar to Confringo, so I'm going to find Confringo in the SpellDefinition Static Table, right-click next to the number, so right-click next to 20, and select Duplicate. This is going to start a new spell entry, and then I can edit it and then add it to the SpellDefinition Static Table. First thing we're going to change are going to be the spell type ID and this upgrade ID. So I'll select spell type ID, type in Fulminous, and then select our Fulminous spell. Then I'll click the upgrade ID, type in Fulminous, and then I'll select the spell _Fulminous _base. Then I'm going to leave the rest of these by default. I'm going to go over what I think are some of the most important ones. So the first one's going to be range. Most spells use 3000, but if you want a spell that you have to be close to the player, you can do something smaller like 550. Next up is going to be cooldown time. This is going to be how long after a spell is cast in combat does the player need to wait before they can reuse the spell. Next up is going to be damage objects. This is going to be how much damage the spell does to objects that aren't enemies. Then last up is going to be this damage character, which is going to be how much damage the spell does to enemies. Once everything looks good, scroll to beginning. Make sure this didn't revert back to Confringo, so we're just going to make sure it says +Fulminous and spell under Fulminous base. Then we'll select plus to add it to the SpellDefinition Static Table. Now we're finished with the database stuff, so we can close out of our static tables. If we look at an existing spell in the Creator Kit, we'll see that it consists of two assets. It has a spell blueprint. This is going to define what kind of VFX and sound effects our spell uses. Then it has a spell record, which we're going to add to the player 1 to be able to use this spell in-game. Next, we're going to navigate back to our mod folder, then we'll build these two assets. Next up, we're going to create that SpellTool blueprint. So I'm going to right-click in my mod folder, select Blueprint Class, and I'm going to type in SpellTool. Then we're going to have a couple different spell tools depending on the type of spell you want to use. So if you want to use an AoE spell, a channeling spell like Accio or Lumos, or what we want similar to Confringo, we're going to want the Fire Once spell tool. There's going to be spells that the player just fires once, then just has to wait for the cooldown to end before they can fire it again. So we'll select Fire Once spell tool, then select OK. And then following the naming conventions of the other spell tools, we're going to call this spell underscore our spell name, then spell. So this one we're going to have spell underscore Fulminous spell. Next up, we're going to create that SpellTool Record data asset. So we're going to right click on our mod folder, select miscellaneous, and then select data asset. From here you'll type in spell, tool, then select SpellTool Record. And then following the same naming conventions as the other SpellTool records, we're going to call this DA for data asset underscore spell underscore our spell name spell record. So we're going to have DA underscore spell underscore Fulminous spell record. Next up, we're going to connect our spell blueprint to the spell record. So we're going to double click to open our SpellTool record. First up, this spell tool is going to be our SpellTool blueprint. So we'll select that in our mod folder and select this arrow to add it to our spell tool. Next up is going to be audio switch name. This appears to be the key that the game looks up to decide what audio line should play for your spell. So following the naming conventions for the other spells, we're just going to call it Fulminous, so just our spell name. Next up, we're going to have our lookup name. This is going to be the key that our SpellTool record looks up to determine what spell to cast. So we're going to call it spell underscore our spell name. So we're going to have spell underscore Fulminous. Then for context, we're going to select the same as the other spells. So we're going to do full body spell equipped. So we're going to scroll down until we find the F's, and then select full body spell equipped. Then we can save and then close out of our data asset. Next up, we're going to allow this player to use this spell. To do this, we're going to add our Fulminous spell record to the player's toolset components of the BP underscore wand tool. So we're going to do this through a mod mutator so it exports with our mod. Next, we're going to create our mod mutator. So we're going to right click on our mod folder, select blueprint class, and then we're going to type in mod mutator. Then we're going to select this first mod mutator option and then select it to add it to our mod. Then we're going to call this BP underscore mod mutator. Next up, we're going to double click our mod mutator blueprint to open up our mod mutator. This mod mutator is what we're going to use to tell the game what assets we want our mod to either change or add to. The first thing we're going to add to our mod mutator is going to be this actor type for spawn notifications. So we're going to add in this BP underscore wand tool. So we're going to press the plus button to add an element, then select BP underscore wand tool. This is going to tell our mod mutator that we want to run some type of code whenever our BP underscore wand tool is spawned. So when that BP wand tool is spawned, we want our mod mutator to tell the game to add the SpellTool record that we just created. To do this, we're going to add an override function. So we're going to find functions over to the left, select this override button, and then select receive actor spawned notification. So the first thing we're going to do is cast this to our BP underscore wand tool. This is going to let us get that toolset component from the BP wand tool blueprint. So we're going to drag and drop off that execute node, and then type in cast to BP underscore wand tool. And then make sure you select the wand tool, not the wand tool class option. Then we're going to drag and drop our spawned actor and place it into our object. Now that we have the wand tool, we're going to use it to get the toolset component. So we're going to select this as BP wand tool, then we're going to drag and drop, and type in toolset component, scroll down to the bottom, and then select get toolset component. Next up, we're going to do a safety check just to make sure this toolset component is valid before we try to add our SpellTool record to it. So we're going to drag and drop this toolset component, type in is valid, and then select is valid. We're going to hook up our execute node from our cast to BP wand tool to our isValid node. Next up, we're going to add our spell record to this toolset component. So we're going to drag and drop this toolset component, and then type in add to tools, and then select add tools to record. Then we're going to hook up the execute node, and then tidy this up a little bit. The last thing we need to do is add this to our spell record. So we can click this, we'll type in fulminous, then use this DA underscore spell underscore fulminous spell record. Then we'll just compile, save, then we can close out of this mod mutator. Now before we can test in the Creator Kit, we're going to need to add what event's going to play when the player casts this spell. So we're going to open our spell blueprint, and then find this spell start action. Then we're going to select the fire full body spell. Then we'll compile, save, and then we're going to minimize out of our spell blueprint. Now if we play into our level, open our spell menu, we'll be able to equip our fulminous spell, and when we try to cast it, the player will do that fire full spell action. Note if you don't see this happening, make sure you check your database records and make sure you're following those naming conventions exactly. Next up, we're going to set what kind of VFX plays when we use our spells. So to do this, we're going to open up our spell blueprint. Next thing we're going to do is add a new munitions actor. This is going to be the projectile VFX that plays whenever we cast our spell. To do this, we're going to scroll down to the impact section, select the plus button, and then we're going to add a munitions actor. The Creator Kit has a bunch of munitions options already that we can choose from, but you can also import your own. To find these, we'll select gameplay and munitions. I'm going to use the subsonic medium dark wizard thief attack for mine, so I'm going to make sure it's selected in my content browser. Then I'm going to open my spell blueprint, and then I'm going to select this arrow to add that to my blueprint. Then I'm going to compile and save the blueprint. Then if we load into game, we select our fulminous spell and we cast it, you'll see that munition actor. Next, we're going to set the prep muzzle effects. This is going to be the VFX and the sound effects that plays from your tip of your wand whenever you cast your spell. For this VFX, I navigated to Content, VFX, Enemy, Dark Wizard Poacher, and I'm going to use this Dark Wizard Poacher muzzle wand tip. So with this muzzle wand tip selected in my content browser, I'm going to navigate back to my spell blueprint. Then when I see prep muzzle effect, I'm going to use the plus button to add an entry. And then I'm going to type in VFX. And then with this selected, I'm going to press this arrow to add that to my spell. Then I'll compile and save the blueprint. For the sound effect that plays, I found I like this finisher underscore AM underscore lightning strike play. So I'm going to go back to my spell blueprint, then I'm going to select this plus button, and then I'm going to add a new entry, and I'm going to type in SFX. Then with this selected in my content browser, I'm going to select the arrow to add it to my spell. Then I'm going to compile and save the blueprint. They have various sound effects for all the different spells and games, so you can find these all at Content, WYs, Events, and Spells. Now if we use our spell in the level, you'll see that little effect on the tip of your wand, and you'll hear that sound effect. Next we're going to set up our spell to use our spell database. So we're going to open up the spell blueprint, then we're going to scroll down until we see SpellTool, and then in database name, you're going to paste your spell name. So I'm going to paste in Fulminous, and then compile and save. And now when we use our spell in game, it'll have the damage and cooldown that we set in the spell definitions table. Next I'm going to set what VFX plays whenever the spell hits an enemy. So I'm going to open my spell blueprint and scroll to this impact section. From here I'm going to find this hit actors, and then I'm going to add an entry by pressing this plus button. Next we're going to add a Niagara effect here. So I'm going to click this, and then type in Niagara. And then select Niagara VFX. And if I open this, I'm going to be using this lightning effect that I found in Content, VFX, Particles, Magic, Finisher 3 Lightning. So I'm going to select this in the Content browser, and then use this arrow to add it to my spell. Then I'll compile and save this blueprint. Now when we cast a spell, it'll play that VFX whenever it hits an enemy. While we're here, let's set it to play that same VFX whenever it hits the ground. So we'll find this hit terrain effect, press the plus button, we're going to type in Niagara effect. Then select Niagara VFX, and we'll extend this and then make sure it's selected in the content browser, and then press this arrow and compile and save. Next up, we're going to set what sound effect plays whenever the spell hits an enemy or the terrain. So I'm going to use this Incendio Impact sound effect that I found at Content, WYs, Events, Spell, and Incendio. To add this, let's expand the hit actors, and let's use the plus button, and we're going to type in SFX. Then we'll expand this. Then with it selected in the content browser, we're going to select the arrow to add it to our mod. Then we're going to do the same thing with the hit terrain effect. So we're going to expand this, use the plus button to add an entry. Then we're going to type in SFX. And then make sure it's selected in the content browser, and then use the arrow to add it. Then we're going to compile and save our blueprint. There are a ton of different effects you can choose from in the Creator Kit, and a ton of different ways you can customize your spell, so play around with those until you find something you like. Next up, we're going to set the UI icon and finalize our text. So the existing UI icons in game can be found at Content, UI, Icons, and Spells. These are going to be 256 by 256 PNG images with a transparent background. So for this spell, I made two spell icons. I used a Fulminous one, which is going to show up in the full spell menu, and then this mini one, which is going to show up in the spell diamond. Next up, we're going to create an icon data table so we can attach these icons to our spell. So we're going to right click in our content browser, go to miscellaneous, and then select a data table. From here, we're going to search in icon, and then select the icon info, and then press OK. I'm going to name this DT underscore Fulminous spell icons. Now note the name for these three assets in the content browser don't really matter, but when we add them to the data table, we're going to make sure they're exact so the game can find it when it looks through the databases. First, we're going to add the icon for the spell menu, so we're going to double click our data table to open it. And then at the top, we're going to select the plus button to add a new entry, and for this row name, we're going to call it exactly as it looks in the registry, Fulminous. And then for the icon, we're going to select this icon down in the content browser, and then press the arrow key to add it to our row, and then we'll press save. Next up, I'm going to add that smaller icon, so I'm going to select add, and then in the name, make sure it's exact. It's going to be spellmeter underscore Fulminous underscore overlay. Then we're going to select the small one, hit the arrow key to add it to our icon, and then press save. Next, we're going to add this data table to our mod mutator so we can see it in game. We're going to use the same mod mutator we used earlier, so we're just going to double click this one. From here, we're going to add our data table we just created to the icon table that's already in game. So we're going to select this data table extension. Then we're going to have two options. We're going to have additional data and tables to add to. Additional data is going to be our data table in our mod. So we're going to make sure it's selected in the content browser and select this arrow button to add it to the mod mutator. Then tables to add to, we're going to search for our icon and then scroll down until we find UI_DT_icons and select that, and we'll press compile and save, and then we'll close out of our mod mutator. Now when we open up our spell menu, we'll see our first icon, and when we equip it to our spell diamond, we'll see the second one, and from here we can cast our spell. And now all that's left to do is localize that debug text that appears for our spell. We'll do this by opening the localization text editor, so we'll select window, and then scroll down until we find localization text editor, and then select that. This is going to give us an option to set a debug key, and the option we want it to show as in-game. This debug key is going to be exactly what we put into the registry, so we're going to type in fulminous, and then localization for where we want it to appear in-game. We also want it to show as fulminous, and then we'll press apply changes. The description is going to have the same name as the registry ID, except we're going to add _DESC to the end of that for description. Then for our localized text, I'm going to paste in a devastating lightning spell that does significant damage to the target. And we'll press apply changes and then close out of our localization text editor. And now when we open up our spell menu, we're going to see our fulminous spell with the description, a devastating lightning spell that deals significant damage to the target. Then we can equip our spell to our spell diamond and use it just like every other spell in the game. Now all that's left to do is upload our mod. So we're going to select this upload mod button. We'll make sure our right mod's selected. Then we're going to give our mod a name. It's going to be how it appears in game. So I'm going to call it new fulminous spell. Then we're going to add an icon image, so we just want to make sure it's at least 400 by 400 pixels and that it's a square image under 5 megabytes. For category, I'm going to select gameplay, then mod summary, I'm going to put adds a new spell fulminous. Then for the mod description, adds a new spell fulminous as a usable spell for the player. Equip this heavy spell from the spell menu to deal significant damage to an enemy. Once all that looks good, press the upload button. Thanks for watching, and that's going to be it for this video. If you found it helpful, like and subscribe, and let me know what kinds of videos and tutorials you'd like to see next. Wizards Forge Mods, out.